Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Marina, for the invitation and for the very usual, but for these unprecedented times, I think a very, very, very innovative way of communicating within this conference. I found this quite novel and very quite experimental and useful for future use as well. So, as you mentioned, I'm based in Nazarbayev University, Nur-Sultan or Astana as known, in Kazakhstan, in the School of Public Policy. And today I'm going to present a work from a study we have done a few years ago on gender impact and weather extremes in South India. Yeah. This next slide. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, I see the next slide. So the current study, what it suggests, the current study suggests a kind of framework for analyzing the challenges that you may face on climate change in developing regions and in South India in particular. So what we did, we first tried to have a gender and climate change overview in the literature. We gave a high focus on the international agenda. As you may know, you know already that there's a lot of knowledge and literature on that from UNFCCC, from United Nations, from the governmental panel from climate change, national action plans. There are a lot of in-depth and country-specific analysis, and the focus is most developing regions because these regions and the people are living in these regions, especially in rural areas, they're more vulnerable to different, let's say, hazards, as one is maybe climate change for the time being. So we came from the bit general issue like the climate change to variability, because people cannot understand what's going on, in the long term situation. And the study didn't focus on like 10, 15 years time with a time series analysis. It was one-off study within 1 year. So we focused on the weather extremes and gender issues in South Asia. This next slide. Yeah, great. So we developed a kind of impact framework, and let me go one by one briefly in the components. So first we tried to map the inequalities, and how did we do that? We did that through the literature, some consultation with experts from the region and out of the region, and local key stakeholders, not the community. The community was in the second phase, where we did a qualitative assessment. So we assembled focus groups, and the focus groups were in two main regions. I will explain later on. So that the focus groups were representing the community, and then we took the same people that they were participating in the focus groups, and we isolate them one by one and make like a in-person questionnaire to see if the people are having the same beliefs as they had before in the question groups. Because you know the situation that many times when you come in a crowd, you are somehow dragged by the opinion of the crowd. So we want to double check that, and we use some statistical analysis. I will explain it later on. And further on, we came out with some policy recommendations and some comparative evaluation between different policy measures. And that was by ourselves. Next, please. Yes. So the first phase of mapping the inequalities, as mentioned, we had the literature review, we had the experts and the locals, and we came out through, say, 6 main different aspects where the inequality seems to be like distinguished. Further on, we had, as you see here, the land ownership. That's quite also distinguished, not only in South India, but it was in South Asia in general. The income contribution, the decision that is taken between financial issues in the household, labor access, decision on crop preferences, it's a major asset because these are subsistence farmers. So what crop you may grow, it very much has to do with the number 2, with the income contribution actually. And the access to formal and informal village level institutions that has to do with, for instance, water use associations, farming associations, etc. Yes, next please. Yeah, so how did we do that? How do we make operational our framework? As noted in in this matrix before, we use two kinds of tools. First of all, the qualitative approach and the focus group techniques. So we have selected some villages. I will show you later on with the mapping where we did that. It was a random sampling with the village. However, we tried to keep equal representation of males and females. So we had pilot testing before, and we have also facilitator that was mentioning the 6 main areas, as I showed you before, of the potential gender inequalities. Then the quantitative analysis that followed after was based on attribute agreement analysis technique. That technique is like a kind of benchmarking situation when you compare your own views versus somebody else's views. And this is mainly used like for a comparison between different experts. However, it could well work out also within the stakeholders we have in our case. Next, please. Yeah. So the study area, as you see on the left bottom side of the presentation, it is in India and in the southeast India. It was in 2 states. Some years ago it was 1 state. Now it has been split in 2. It's between Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Why we selected these states? Because they have like a lot of drought problems within the last, let's say, 10, 15 years that they have been more acute. And they have made major incidents in this area. So as you see on the right side with the mapping that it's more enlarged, we had the red coloring is the agriculture. So you see the area is actually mostly agriculture area. And with the black dots, we have selected within the regions. In Guntur region, we have selected 9 villages, and in Ankolda, we have selected 5 villages. So 15 villages altogether. Next, please. Yeah. So I'll just give you some descriptives, some socio-demographics or some descriptives of the villages. As you see in the upper side of the table, we have the district state, Telangana. We have the name of the villages, and then we did some coding. I'll explain later on why the coding is about, because we had some graphs and we tried to minimize a bit the space. So in the case of Telangana, we had some technical features that says the villages are mostly dependent on groundwater, like about 65% versus surface water. This is the SF, surface water is 35%. Groundwater, it gives you a bit of water security many times because you can just go as deep as you like technically, I mean like potentially, but technically you cannot go as deep as you like because you may face a lot of depletion, and also you risk the water from the surface as well. They had much like dependence on rice, like 71%, and these villages were not going for cash crops, as they call it, like for commercial crops. They were more substance farmers. The other case on Guntur in Andhra Pradesh, they had like surface water most as a major source. That was because they were very close to the irrigation canals. Rice was dominant, but not that dominant as in the other case, and they were going for cotton. While cotton, it was also a cash crop or commercial crop for profit. In both cases, we had quite a good, let's say, rate of electricity access. Relatively good rate of farming machinery, like about 6%, and the literacy status for primary and secondary was aligned with the average literacy status of the wider region of Southeast India. And you see in the last column we had the FDGs or the focus groups. So we made one focus group in each village. So it was like 15 multiple 6, 90 persons, and the other case we had like 15 villages multiple 9. 135. So altogether we had 225 people. According to like the statistical literature review, it is let's say an acceptance rate for reliability purpose. Next, please. So that's some kind of pilot testing, like images from the case. You may see here only women, but the men were behind the camera. As I said, they were like split evenly between men and women, the pilot groups. Next, please. So yeah, so this is also the pilot testing. That was also the job of facilitators to see how this was working out, which of the questions made some kind of sense. And of course, we had to tailor-made some kind of, the 6 core keys were remaining as such, but we had to tailor-made the questions further so as to attract the interest of the focus groups, because this is the most important thing. So to bring and engage as many people as possible. Next, please. Yeah. So what it came out of the discussion of the focus groups was some statements in terms of the gender inequality. And as said before, we had the 6 core groups, and this we translated this in these statements because we try to make it as digestive as possible with the focus groups. And we have the following one. So we saw that the house and farmland is owned by the female member in about 30%, one of the 3 cases, even if it's owned by the female, many times because the males they would like to have the control of the property, and the dowry many times goes to the males. Then the males are the ones that they control the property rights, and this is a very big issue, especially South India. Women contribute up to half of the cash income, either directly or indirectly through housing works. The decision on regular financial measures are mostly taken by men. Even when women are participating in financial decisions, they're usually young women, younger than 30 years old. And this is the case because the younger women also are more literate than the older generation. About 50% of the cases, wife and husband together decide on what crops to be grown. And about 30%, we have the male children actually appointed by their fathers to decide on what crops to be grown. In about half the cases, the women belong to self-help groups. Self-help groups are a kind of scheme that has been set up by the Indian government on promoting, let's say, somehow the entrepreneurship or the inclusion of women into the communities, and they give them grants or they give them some subsidies. And finally, we saw that there is a low representation of women in the decision taken at community level. So they are more or less underrepresented there. So that's the inequalities we just somehow try to map. Further on, please. Next. Yeah. The concerns that we have seen there is that the men are more concerned about the labor security, women more about the food security of their household. There was some statement that there's an increased violence on women, especially when they have very acute drought situation. The men, they try somehow to face these extreme weather conditions by taking loans. There is probably many of you have heard about the situation where many people have taken like a severe amount of loans with a very, very high interest rate. And then some of them have committed suicide in South India. That's quite in the news in the last years. The women, on the other hand, they try to face the situation by getting support from extensive family, either from the parents or from the relatives. Both of them seems to try to change cropping partners to water-resistant crops. Cotton is one case, but other cases as well, and to livestock. And initiatives, both of them, they try to go for new cultivating approaches, as said, livestock. And for women, they try to make some kind of their small entrepreneurships so as to sustain themselves economically. Next, please. Yeah, so that's what the acronym I was talking about before was the reason about. So we have here the graph where on the left hand, on the vertical axis, we have the rate of agreement. So we try to see how much the villages were agreeing on what we have initially said about the 6 core areas of inequalities. And on the horizontal side, we have 15 villages, the Nagornov, the C1, and the Guntur, the C2. So what we see here with the vertical lines, we see that more or less about from 75 to 85%, there is an agreement that these are the area of inequalities, and the inequalities are presented as the way we have initially suspected in the literature review. We have 2 exceptions with the third village of Nalgonda and the second village also of Guntur, but it's not a big exception. Overall, the trend is upwards. what it's important that you have just to pay attention a bit is that the small dotted lines you see there is the mean rate, the mean rate of agreement. And as you see, the dotted lines are different within each village, which means that each village is not identified entirely with the other village. So each village has its own views and opinions about how to defend the gender inequalities in climate change. Next, please. Yeah, and this is the results when we did the individual questionnaire, as I told you. Then we took each focus group represented individually, and we had what you see. You see all the statements, either inequality or concerns or initiatives, and you see the AM or AF on the horizontal axis. The M stands for male, the F stands for female. So again, we see that what it has been said in the focus groups is not far from what the people believe individually. So it seems that they were not somehow dragged by some, some outspoken person that has just dominated the discussion, as usually happens. They already aligned what it was said beforehand, with three differences, let's say. The difference is like in the 3 AM, where we saw that people, both male and female, do not agree that the female bring equal amount of money in the household. The reason that they do not agree is that especially the females, they said that although we do bring, it's not acknowledged from the males. And admittedly, the males also secretively somehow they accepted the same thing, that we do not well acknowledge what's the contribution of the women, because we consider them a bit underrepresented. The seventh also statement that has to do with the young males, the sons actually in the household. It's not that much truthful that they take the decisions. And the 3BM or 3BF, as you see, about the violence. That was another issue, the violence. People, as you see here, they accepted up to 30% that there is violence in the households. What they consider as a violence is the natural, let's say, the natural force, let's say, right? However, when we discussed afterwards, they did not consider somehow the psychological violence as a form of violence, only the natural one. That's why probably the rate of acceptance here is very low. Next, please. Yeah, so we came out with some kind of conclusions that, of course, they cannot be generalized, or they cannot infer the bigger picture of South India or South Asia. There is some resemblance with other countries. For instance, I've been working in Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and also in the Southern Asia quite a few years. I can say that there is to some extent some resemblance, and that's why probably it may like to draw some inferences from this area to some other cases as well. So what we noticed that the weather extremes, we may say, they impact differently gender, and that was like a double checking from our side. It is acknowledged in the literature, but we tried to find out how the literature is coinciding with the let's say the sayings, or let's say the input from the people. Because what we realize in many studies, we have either this or that. We have either the literature or we have the people. We see that land ownership management is a major driver of gender inequality. They need both of them common training programs. Each community may react quite uniquely. That's why it's maybe better when you try to make large scale of projects and large scale of climate change programs to consult first the regional and local authorities. Next, please. That was taken by a project I just give you as a reference. It's called Climate Adapt with NIBIO. If you Google it, and you will find out more information if you are interested about this project. Next, please. And the results have been published in the relevant journal, as you see here. And whoever may be more interested, I will be very glad to share with you this material and any other material you may be interested in. Next. Thank you very much. I've seen my time clock here, 19 minutes, 47 seconds. So I hope that I was quite on time. Thank you. Thank you very much.